Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of So Much More Than Stardust. My name is Wakas, and I'm your host for today. You will hear a conversation with my friend Kevin, who you can also see. He's sitting across from me. And, this thought that I had, it came up in the conversation with Kevin today, but I've been thinking about it for a few days. What I've been thinking about is that, have you ever come across somebody that does a job and that does that job really well? It could be, not a very significant job. It could be the way that they put your burger together or the way that they clean your car when they're detailing it, or the way your server brings you the food. Have you been to one of those Mexican restaurants where they've got like 7 plates piled up on their arm and they make it look easy? And I was thinking, or a musician, you go somebody and they pick up a guitar and strike up a melody and you go like, I wish I was talented like that. Yes, there is a talent to that, but there's more than that. I think that excellence is often a result of the practice of excellence. We learn to do something and we realize that we're not very good at it, or we're not as good at it as we want to be. So we try and improve. And then we try and do it in that improved fashion. And even if we fail, we go back and we try and do it again and again and again. And there comes this time without even knowing it when we become really good at it and it just flows. So what I was thinking about was that, we see all these people who are really good at their jobs and we think that they were just talented. And a lot of the times, even with what we think are not very technical jobs, it takes years of training and a lot of perseverance and a lot of failure and willing to persevere through one's failure. And then one day you get really good at your job and you can do it effortlessly at whatever you're trying to do. It's not only jobs, or it is jobs which can be seen in a completely different way. It could be parenting. It could be how to be a good friend. It could be how to support your community. It could be volunteering. It could be any number of things. But if you're trying to do something today and you're struggling, the message is don't give up. The message is keep persevering. And it's okay to fail as long as you're willing to get up. And both Kevin and I ride motorcycles, and we can tell you this: it takes a lot of falling down before you get to be any good on a motorcycle. The most important thing is that you got up and got back on the bike after you fell down. So today, if you fall down, remind yourself you can always get back up and get back on the bike. Here's my conversation with Kevin. I hope you enjoy it. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for agreeing to do this podcast with me. I appreciate you taking the time out, even though you're doing your single dad duties this weekend.
Yes, my daddy-daughter weekend. I love those.
I was half expecting your daughter to join us in the conversation, but then it would have been all about her. So
it would have been all about her. I can guarantee you that. Yeah.
Which is kind of what childhood is, right? And parenthood. It's all about the child most of the time. And sometimes we don't realize that until later on, right?
She is at a really fun age. She's 7.5 right now. And I am embracing every moment with her that I can right now because she thinks that I walk on water. And I cherish that right now. And you never know how quick that might change. I'm always going to have a partner life, but I'm very, very much appreciative and blessed that she's a pretty easy daughter.
Well, as long as we're being, having these sensitive, touchy-feely moments, I'll tell you.
We're going in quick.
Yeah, that probably the best compliment I ever get is when my grown daughter, who's going to be 30 soon, posts something on Facebook or sends me a text saying, "You're my best friend and always will be." And, that's a hell of a thing to get to hear from one's daughter or one's children. It's kind of unfortunate that I never got there with my dad or my mom, but, such are the vagaries of life. So how was your relationship with your parents?
My relationship with my parents was awesome.
Yeah?
I didn't move far away from the nest. They're still in my childhood home, which is about 5 miles from my house where I live today.
How about that?
Yeah, isn't that cool? And when my daughter Remy spends a night with them over there, they have a great relationship too. She actually sleeps in what was my old bedroom.
Huh.
Yeah, so it was cool. No, my parents and I have had an excellent relationship growing up. We still have an excellent relationship today. I talk to them several times a week, see them probably at least once a week, sometimes more than that, depending on what's going on.
So I would hazard a guess and say that your room does not look the same as it used to when you were living in it.
That is a very fair guess, knowing that you and I crossed paths at a very high level because of motorcycling. You
Right.
can imagine that the number of posters on my wall,
Same.
reflective of my love and passion of motorcycling, cover the wall. And yes, those have been removed for many decades now. But physically, it's the same structure.
So did you save those posters?
No, I did not save those posters. Those are
Were
gone.
they mostly dirt bike posters, or were they,
No.
street racing and all that?
It was a lot of car stuff,
Yeah.
and it was also a lot of motorcycles. And the motorcycles, the memorable ones that I can remember were that I would get at Prince Plus at South County Mall here in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
And they were probably about 5 feet tall and had 4 different motorcycles on them that were leader
Right,
bikes, sport bikes. So they were the GSX-R 1100, the ZX-10, the
I
Yamaha
remember those.
R1, and then the Kawasaki, maybe a Kawasaki.
GPZs or something like that?
They weren't even really the race bikes. These were the street
the
legal
KZ
ones that I still
1100
had.
or something
Yep.
like that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was that and maybe a few racing ones. I didn't develop a love for racing until a little bit later in life, but just the love of motorcycles in general has always been there.
So I remember I used to see these, they had the Moto Trend motorcycle magazine, and there are a couple of other, I think Ride, which was an English motorcycle magazine. And they would always have, the latest and greatest. Like I remember when the Yamaha 750 Seika with the first digital dash came out, and I was like, oh my God, this is from outer space. And I remember that they'd usually, most of them were English or American magazines. So they'd usually have the biker on there, usually at a lean angle, and they would have their helmets, properly logoed. So it was either a Bell or a Simpson. Those were the two main helmets. And every now and then a Shoei or an Arai would, make its brand. And I could never get a Bell or a Simpson helmet. I think I had a Shoei, but, and I was like, when I get to the States, I'm going to get a Bell or a Simpson. I really wanted a Simpson helmet. And when I got into motorcycling here, they'd stopped making motorcycle helmets. They only made race car helmets.
Yep.
So that dream went unfulfilled, sorry to say. So you obviously grew up in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, South St. Louis County.
Yeah. How was your childhood? What dominated your activities? What do you remember most poignantly from that time? It was a little different from how the kids are, from Remy's childhood, for example.
Man,
right?
times were so different. I grew up in a neighborhood, so I have an older brother who's 4.5 years older than me. There were friends in the neighborhood that were his age, the older kids. There were friends in the neighborhood that were my age. And man, we just had so much fun. The time was so different. It was so carefree. We would play baseball. We would play football together, the big kids versus the little kids. We'd intermix the teams so everything was balanced. And just had a really good time. And I think of one of the primary differences is I was big into bicycling, as most kids were, just had some BMX bikes. And I think about how far away from my house I got on a bicycle and just knew to be home. Everybody my age talks about it. When did you have to be home? When the streetlights came on. As long as I was home in time for dinner and not hurt, nobody cared. The world was different. And I think about going down 2-lane roads that lead up to my parents' house today on a bicycle at, 8 years old. And that was norm. It wasn't, my parents were flippant. They were great parents and other kids were with me. And I think about that by today's standards, my daughter being, 7.5 now, so close to my age at doing the same thing, no way. It's a different world.
So you think the city has become more populous? You think people have changed? You think, what happened?
Just the awareness of safety has changed in our environment. When I came home from the hospital, I probably came home in a car that either didn't have seat belts or just lap belts. And now the sensitivity around car seats and 5-point car seats and facing the right way, that just didn't exist back then. So part of it, I think, is an awareness of safety that we didn't have back then. And part of it is we're just more aware through social media of the dangers that lie out there that could impact us and our children. And now the desire to keep them safe is different than it was in the 80s when I was growing up.
Are you saying there was an accepted rate of loss when we were growing up? Yeah, we'll have 5 kids. If one of them, doesn't get all the...
That's an interesting take on that statement.
But that would define the approach my parents took. They're like, yeah, well. But anyway, so, my job is all about safety, and I think your job is all about safety. And I think, as we were growing up, our exposure was limited because there was not that much information out there. The information, and a lot of the information that was out there, which was put out in the name of safety, was probably a little mythical, a mix of, urban legend and so on and so forth. And now we all have access to well-documented, hazards and dangers.
Studies.
Yeah. And I am glad, I am glad that safety has become a priority for us as a society and for us as individuals. However, when I'm on the street, I realize that not everybody feels that way. That there are those among us who go like, safety, schmafety. We don't really need to care about that. So did you always grow up, when you were growing up, was safety an issue for you at that time? Or was it an issue just because, hey, I'm going to get yelled at if I show up with a scraped elbow or a skinned knee or what have you?
No, I would say I was, wow, that's a great question. There was an awareness of safety built into me at that age. And an example I can give you is, going back to the motorcycling, is my father purchased new a 1971 Kawasaki MT1 mini trail. Mm-hmm. So it's like a little Honda Trail 70.
Right.
Still has it today at that house.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned to ride on. I developed my love of riding from him on that little 75cc, 80cc motorcycle. So riding that is inherently more dangerous than riding a bicycle, just in terms of speed and what it can do. So always had a helmet on when I was riding that. Bicycles back then, kids didn't wear helmets. So yes, there was some level of safety more associated to the motorcycling aspect of it than it was with the bicycling thing. And again, it was trust. Like, my mom didn't immediately, day one, let me go far away from the bike. It was over time.
Right. We
developed trust and a sense of responsibility that I can leave, go have fun, come home, and not be in trouble, be home when I need to be, not scraped up. And then over time, it developed into who I am today.
Yeah. So did you grow up in a big family?
No. We have a very, very small family. So it's my mom and dad, then my brother that I mentioned. So that was just us in the household. And I have if I had a family reunion, it would not take a very big space to fit everybody in there. Some aunts and uncles that I had didn't have children. My father's sister had 2 kids, my cousins. One is 10 days younger than me, and another one's a couple years older than me. So in between my brother and I, and we were pretty close growing up and lived fairly near each other. But overall, I have a very, very small family.
I had a huge family when I was growing up.
Yeah.
We were 2 brothers, but I had so many cousins, and they were all like brothers and sisters. And so when we'd get together in the summer, it was mayhem and chaos, which, I enjoyed and I miss it now. But it was like growing up in a big collective hippie family without the weed and, the carefree attitude. We were very stressed out and tense people. But, so school. Where did you go to school? I guess that's the ultimate St. Louis question.
That is the St. Louis question. What high school did you go to? So I stayed in the public school system the whole time growing up. Bounced around to a couple different grade schools just because they changed the lines on them. Ultimately, I went to what's called Oakville Senior High School, which is still very near my house today. And as I was about halfway through school, my mother actually worked there. She took a job so each different grade had their own principal, and their own principal had their own secretary or administrative assistant to help with day in, day out. So my mom was the secretary for my principal growing up, which it was a blessing and a curse at times.
She knew everything that was going on with you in school.
She did. Yeah. There's some good stories about that. And then I went to a community college here in St. Louis called Merrimack, and then for 2.5 years, and then went to ultimately Central Missouri State University in Warrensburg, which is now called, I think, University of Central Missouri. They changed the name a few years ago.
So when you were in high school, did you know that you were going to college? What was your arc? Were you active in athletics? Were you academically bright? Was any kind of, track, defined itself for you? Or did you have to do some thinking and soul searching about that?
I really had to do some thinking and soul searching about that. I was not an athlete. I didn't play, I don't believe, any sports in high school. I was more interested in just hanging out with my friends, doing the bicycling thing. As we got older, we kind of developed into cars a whole lot. Not crazy working on cars, but just hanging out and going fast and doing things like that. I would say that college was definitely part of the plan because that was, my dad graduated college and they had saved up for it and they talked about it a lot. My older brother went to college. So that was definitely part of the path for me. I wouldn't say I was academically gifted. I did way better in grade school and junior high than I did in high school. I kind of became a little bit lazy and had fun and got in a little trouble here and there. Nothing too crazy, but my focus necessarily wasn't on academics at that moment. So I wasn't getting a scholarship. Going anywhere to Harvard was not in my future.
So you were a regular kid.
I was just a regular kid
in the day and enjoying yourself and going like, okay, I suppose, I'll go to college once I get done. And then the path kind of showed itself to you. So when you went to community college, did you have particular focus of interest or...
At that moment, I started with general studies because I knew there's a lot of requirements that you had to have that transferred generically to any college I decided that I want to go to later down the road. So most of the studies were geared towards that. At first, I wanted to go into business administration. And that was going to be my focus for a semester until I met accounting. Accounting was a requirement. Not a huge math guy. And I thought, I'm having trouble with accounting 1. There's no way accounting 2 is going to be in my repertoire. So got out of that. And as I did some soul searching, I kind of figured that I wanted to go towards the path of criminal justice with the thought of being a cop from the federal perspective of it. So DEA, FBI, something like that, something kind of exciting. So that was my thought process towards the later part of the 2.5 years at Merrimack.
And this was totally internally motivated, or did you know anybody who was in in DEA or?
No, I didn't know anybody in any federal organization. There were some that came to school and talked on behalf of the class, and that interested me. I had a little interest in law enforcement growing up around my house and did ride-alongs with some of the cops. And got to know them just from even talking to them at school and just a conversational, not like me getting in trouble and getting to know them that way. And it was just interesting to me. And that was kind of in my DNA. I was kind of a rule follower and thought, okay, I can get interested in this. I liked excitement. I didn't like the idea of sitting behind a desk for hours on end. So that was my thought process, the later part of community college, and steered my decision to go to University of Central Missouri because they have a pretty strong criminal justice program.
I see. So you transferred to Central Missouri
Transferred from St. Louis to Warrensburg.
In your junior year?
Yeah, it would have been probably my start of my junior year, midway through. Yeah, I was 20, I think I was 21 at the time, 20 or 21 when I went out there. And yeah.
And criminal justice was part of your, was the major at that time?
Yeah.
That's what you were going to graduate with. Did that involve a lot of law?
No.
What is, what do they teach you in criminal justice courses?
That goes back a long time, Okas. You're asking me to rely on my memory.
Yeah.
A lot of it is...
I'm just wondering, what is a degree in criminal justice? Is it focused on enforcement? Is it focused on strategies? Is it, so that kind of, general gestalt.
So I graduated in 1998 to give you a context on time of college. So going back to that time, even at that point in time, a lot of the classes were focused on the community aspect of policing, how to handle people, how to talk to them in order to get them to do what you want them to do. If you're going to arrest them, if you're just talking to them, if you're stopping to interrogate them, a lot of it is how to talk to them to get them to do what you want to do. Like if they're under arrest, go at them this way. If you want to talk to them and not make them run if they're guilty, go easy. Get them to trust you at first. So a lot of it was the different styles of policing that officers have. And we had a lot of retired officers that were our instructors. And they shared their experiences, both good and bad. There was some element of law in there, but I mean, not near, headed towards like what you get if you're going for a law degree.
Okay. So it was more people handling, people management, de-escalation of conflict, et cetera, et cetera.
It didn't go very, very deep into the laws and like what constitute a violation of a law or not, if there's any kind of a gray area. It talked hypothetically about it. But I wouldn't say it went deep into like, did somebody really break the law in this case or not?
Right.
It wasn't terribly difficult. And I don't know if that's because it came easy to me.
Yeah.
Or the curriculum, by comparison, you're not coming out of there with a law degree. They're meant to have you be prepared to be a police officer where you're really going to learn the on-the-job experience. When you become a recruit and you're doing all your ride-alongs with that, that's when you're getting all the on-the-job training that's going to be meaningful and shape the rest of your career, however long that's going to be. It was more concept in the classroom time that I had.
So you graduate from Central Missouri, and then you become a police officer?
No.
Oh.
I shifted. So I wanted, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, to be federal. I wanted to go kicking doors, be DEA, all that. And as I went down that road, it's difficult to make the transition from college graduate straight into a federal job unless you're a superstar, unless you know people, unless there's a reason for you to make that jump. They typically want you to be a county cop or a city officer, gain experience before you go into that.
Gotcha.
Yep. And I thought about that and started, talking to some people and interviewing, and then just decided that wasn't for me.
Hey.
Yep.
What made you, was there one factor or was there a whole host of factors that played into that decision?
I honestly think that I was maybe slightly disappointed that I couldn't jump straight to the federal thing.
Of course.
And I didn't do enough research to figure that out. And maybe my mindset just changed a little bit back then. I decided that the hours weren't exactly what I wanted, or, there was not one important moment in my life that made that change real for me. As I got closer to the end, I'm like, I'm just not sure that I want to do this. I can find something to do. This will open up other doors for me. And I'll just try a few different things and figure out what that is. So I ended up working for, I think my first job after college was working at Neiman Marcus in loss prevention.
Oh, okay.
So I'd catch shoplifters. So I would sit down in front of a wall of cameras, a wall of monitors.
That was Neiman Marcus here in
Frontenac, in St. Louis.
All right.
And had a great team, had a great boss. All the coworkers there were awesome, had a ton of fun. And we would catch shoplifters, everything from running into the door, the grab and dash, to older women who were extremely wealthy that would steal stuff for whatever psychological reason they would steal it. They had plenty of money to pay for it, but for some reason, shoplifting, they'd become targets for us to catch, and there was a lot of those.
So this was your first job, and
that was
your first exposure to this.
Yeah.
And how did you become aware of this opportunity?
I think going back that far, that was probably classifieds in the newspaper.
Okay.
This is, so the internet is born at this time, but not anywhere near what it is today.
No, yeah.
And classifieds in the newspaper were still popular back then. So I would just look for jobs in there. I remember doing that with my parents, trying to find
red circles, and then calling on the phone. And
I applied for it and got hired pretty quickly. I was pretty well qualified to do it.
And did you have to go through some training? Was there anything in particular that was different that you learned before you started the job, or it was mostly like, okay?
I could apply some of the laws about pursuit that I learned in college to this job, and talking to people, like in detaining them. Again, how you talk to them dictates if they run or if they talk to you, and I'd prefer they not run. So we didn't have to do a whole lot with that job, because once we caught them and detained them, and if we felt good that it was a good stop, we stopped right there and then called the police, and they would come arrest them.
Okay.
So the level of detail required for that job, once you catch them and identify them, is not difficult. It's learning who to look for on the floor that's the bad person in order to make that stop is where the trick is.
So it's sort of a pattern recognition.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't know if, like, You always keep an eye on the doors. You have no idea if somebody is going to come in and grab a handful of stuff and run out, which you really can't predict. And other ones, you'll follow around the store for hours. And then when they feel comfortable at that right moment, they'll drop a $300 thing of perfume in their bag and walk out with it.
Wow. If you're watching them on the cameras, then there's somebody else who's actually there on the floor, right?
Sure. It depended on the situation. Sometimes two of us were working the cameras, and then if we saw something interesting, the other person would go on the floor. And there was different spots where we could be very discreet and close to them, where if we needed to do a pursuit, we could do that.
Were you wearing a uniform?
No. Plain clothes.
Were you carrying?
No.
No. Okay.
This is,
all right.
And especially today's world is very different. Like, I don't think any loss prevention people stop you for fear of death, getting shot. And this world's different than it was in the 90s back then. But no, we didn't have any sorts of defense on us. And they didn't want that. We weren't that kind of, they weren't that interested in protecting product to put our lives in danger, put a lawsuit in danger if we pepper spray somebody or shoot somebody or something that we shouldn't have. So, no.
So as an ex-loss prevention guy, what's your reaction when you hear that certain towns in California are basically letting people walk out with goods? I see those YouTube videos and I go, what is happening here? People just walking in, selecting out stuff, loading in a shopping cart, and just leaving.
I have a very hard time with that.
I mean, it's just, it seems very surreal, does it not?
It does. Interestingly, the other side of that I just saw the other day, and I can't tell you where it was because I don't remember the city or if I even saw it. But there was another video of a Best Buy where 3 people, I think, came in to the cell phone area and did a grab and run of cell phones. Did you see this?
I did. And the guards, they went into this football formation.
That wasn't even guards. They had the same blue Best Buy. They were salespeople, I think. But they put up a defensive wall like they were going to try to tackle them to keep them from going out. I'm like, that's what our country needs. They don't need the passive, just walk out with it.
Yeah, the first thought that came to my head was, man, those people need to get paid more.
Agreed.
If they're going to take this kind of risk at their job.
Whatever they're making, they need more.
There was this one time a while ago when I thought that I was going to quit medicine, right? And I was going to do something else. And, perhaps this is not what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life and, other incoherent thoughts. So I looked at various jobs, and one of the jobs was, you'll be a salesperson for these little Boost Mobile and all of that, these little kiosks that they have in there.
Yeah.
And when I heard how much they paid, and what the chances of you making a commission on the sales was, I was like, yeah, perhaps I should stick to what I do.
That would be quite a step backwards, I think.
Oh, yeah. It would have been. It would have been a completely different, I would have had to really retrain myself and, how you, I have a lot of respect for salespeople. I think, it is one of the hardest jobs to, try and, talk to somebody and then, sell them a product, which they may or may not want, which they might need, that you can see that, that is their need, but they can't see it. And yet to convince them that even though they're spending money, this is going to be profitable in the long run or, what have you. And I mean, and these are people who are doing sales on, a respectable level. A few of my friends, they sell IT and are in that. You being one of them. But, the people who are on TV, on late night TV, who are selling, knives that cut through the soles of your shoes and, the chamois leather guy.
Yeah.
And obviously they're making money because, they've been going on for decades now.
Right.
That's quite a talent.
There's a wide range of sales jobs and different sales types that require vastly different skill sets.
Yes.
But I agree with you 100% that it takes a special person to figure that out and to master that and get people to trust you to have the next conversation that'll ultimately lead to the purchase of whatever it is that you're selling.
And I sometimes think about, they talk about artificial intelligence and technology, coming in and taking over people's jobs, robotics and so on and so forth. And I go like, yeah, A robot doing a used car salesman job, I would pay money to watch that happen.
Right.
You know, I mean, just that level of, ingratiation and smarminess and trying to sell you a product which you know is definitely not what they need.
Right.
So I think some of those jobs are safe from the technology revolution, but then again,
Agreed.
some of them I don't know. So you did the Neiman Marcus thing. How long did that gig last?
That was, I think, around 2 years or so.
Oh,
I started in
wow.
98 and went through the millennium because I remember I was working there when we went from 1999 to 2000. Everybody was
where
concerned.
everything was supposed to crash.
What
and
are
dent.
computers going to do?
Yeah.
And I remember the manager of our department at that time spent the night in the store, and they had flashlights and food and all for them. I'm like, these are POS systems. There was a little bit more to it than that, but I'm like, come on. The doors will unlock tomorrow. We'll figure it out. But yeah, there's a lot of awareness around it back then. So yeah, that lasted about 2 years or so. And then after that, I got back more closely to what you would think of with a criminal justice degree and went to corporate physical security. So uniform, gun, badge.
Oh, wow.
A little bit more training now.
Yeah.
Well, a lot more training, I should say, than especially loss prevention for a company in town, a financial services firm, which is no longer around, called A.G. Edwards.
Oh, yeah. I do remember A.G. Edwards.
Yep.
They were financial
Not far from here, yeah.
advisors,
They're a
right?
brokerage place, yeah. Awesome company. Really, really, really great company. Ultimately, it was purchased by Wachovia, which was ultimately purchased by what it is today, Wells Fargo Advisors.
Oh, I did not know that. I just knew that A.G. Edwards didn't exist. And then Wachovia, I'm somewhat familiar with that. They were a bank and financial services company. I didn't know that they got bought out by Wells Fargo.
Yep.
And Wells Fargo is originally a South Dakota-based company, or?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what their basis is. I know they were primarily a bank, and now they have the wealth management arm of it through the brokerage side.
Right.
And that's what is in the same structure that was A.G. Edwards when I worked there today.
So you started with A.G. Edwards, and then you persisted with Wachovia, and then you continued working for Wells Fargo?
No, I didn't make it that far.
Oh, okay.
So I had another transition in there as I go along my path. So I started like on evening shift from 4 to midnight, did that for a period of months, and then got involved in a little bit more training opportunities and presenting in front of people different things that we had to do for what was called the Bank Protection Act. We had to train part of our business in order to be compliant with whatever laws govern use of how we were doing business at that moment. So I went to day shift. Whole different set of circumstances when you're guarding an empty building at night from 4 to midnight and on the weekends to during the day when there's a lot of people there. So we responded to some health calls if people would have health issues and heart attacks and things like that. So a lot more activity, a lot more interaction with people, executive transport when people had to move around in the city for different locations. We would take all our SLT around. So learning how to deal with them, a lot more opportunities for exposure and growth. And I got the opportunity to interact with some of the folks in our IT security department and took a liking to them. They liked me. And ultimately, there was a woman who suggested that I was looking to get out of corporate security at this moment into something else. And a woman that I worked with suggested that I look in the IT department for jobs. And I'm thinking, I don't have an IT degree. I'm thinking of IT as like bits and bytes and technology. And that's not me. I don't have that skill set, and that's not where I wanted to take my path to. And she said, there's a lot of jobs that don't really require that. So I found an awesome job working for another awesome team in the IT security department, but it wasn't bits and bytes. It was training and awareness because identity theft was popular at that time.
Okay.
Don't leave your computer password taped with a Post-it note to your monitor. Don't leave it under your keyboard and your mouse pad. All the things that people did because the internet and computers are exploding at this moment, and identity theft is a big thing. So I helped run a website internally that talked about IT security related stuff. I supported and directed any problems that the employees had to get them to the right team within my department to handle those situations. And the coolest part about this job was knowing that identity theft, again, was on the rise. And we're a financial services firm. We have brokers all over the country. We had different events where all the brokers would come to the home office and talk to various departments about whatever. And our goal is, how can we support you? You guys bring in all the money. How can we support you? And our manager at the time had the foresight to think, hey, you know what? Let's come up with an identity theft presentation that we can take on the road and brokers can invite us in. We do the presentation on whatever basis they want to do it. Whatever basis, meaning, do you want to offer this as a value-added service to your current clients? Hey, thanks for trusting me with your money. Come in, I'm going to buy you lunch. You listen to this guy come in, Kevin, and talk about identity theft and how you can protect your own information at home. Or as a new sales opportunity, hey, if anybody is, I'm not going to try to sell you my services. You want to bring in your family and friends, just listen to this guy talk about identity theft for an hour. If you want to talk to me about financial stuff, here's my card. And it was so much fun. Got to travel, see a lot of cool places, met a lot of awesome people, and we loosely tracked the growth of what kind of business we brought in to show that whatever budget they put aside for this was worth it. And we brought in a lot of money from that. People that had that soft approach, and that's what every broker wants. They want to bring in new clients. How do you get in front of them, get them to trust you? And you're doing it in the most non-threatening environment ever. You take 100 people and say, hey, listen to me, come talk about my services and what I can offer you for an hour and see what interest there is. Or listen to this guy talk about identity theft, which is a hot topic at that time. No pressure. And you're going to get way more that way. So I had a ton of fun.
Let me backtrack a little bit and ask you about working the night shift and being in an empty building by yourself. I've seen a lot of horror / sci-fi movies that start out like that. And one of my favorite movies is, has the main character as the security guard who's guarding a building. Were you by yourself when you were doing that?
No, there's a whole shift.
Yeah.
There's at least, depending on the time frame that we're talking about, there's at least 5 or 6 primary buildings that we're responsible for, and then several around that area that are smaller ones. So no, on any given shift, we had probably a minimum of 5 people. And
were you confined to one building, or were you...
It would switch time to time. So we had a dispatch station where there is somebody there 100% of the time, and it would switch every hour or 2 hours or whatever everybody agreed upon. So there was somebody round the clock at that position, because that's where all the phone calls come in. That's where all the building alarms would report to, and then they would send people off to if we had to respond to those. There was always a mobile unit driving around in Ford Explorers, were the cars that we had back then, in case we had to go to a building or another. And then there's at least one other primary lobby that was manned 100% of the time. And that was, I can remember sitting there and there's nothing that would happen for hours, but you can't leave in case somebody does come in there. So people were going to night school, they'd do their homework. People were reading books or doing whatever they were doing, crossword puzzles. You're sitting there as long as you're at that position, should anybody come in there. Right. Which was highly unlikely at 3:30 in the morning.
So did you find that time hard to, was it boring at all? Or, were you structured enough that you were able to get through it without, tell me a little bit about your experience.
That is part of what drove me to want to do more. So I mentioned getting involved with doing presentations within this security group, which was not the core focus of this group. But I started working with the leader of our department at that moment and looking for opportunities to do something else. I knew this was not something that I wanted to do the rest of my life. A lot of the guys I worked with were retired military folks, and this was perfect for them, where they were on the downswing of their career. This offered benefits, paid them well. They had a lot of knowledge. They were good, their moral compass was right, the right people that you needed there, but they were happy sitting there doing whatever they wanted to do for that time frame. For me, I'm in my mid-20s probably at this time, okay, this is not my career trajectory. I'm okay doing it now. It's a learning moment for me. Everything's a learning moment. But I knew I wanted more. And that's why making this switch to day shift, where you have more things that you have to do and learn and respond to and interact with, really helped change a little bit of my focus and knowing what I wanted to do ultimately.
So currently you're doing mostly the IT or the presentation related stuff?
So my current job is business-to-business sales.
Okay.
I work for Equifax. The arm of it in here in St. Louis is called Equifax Workforce Solutions. And I started, so the last transition from the criminal justice kind of, security side of things to where I'm at now was moving from the IT security department. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Wachovia acquired A.G. Edwards.
Right.
My team got displaced, my entire team. And I had enough time that I knew I could find a different job. It wasn't like see you later. It was a 90-day window or something. Got a severance. It ended up working out great for me at that time. And then went to Equifax Workforce Solutions as the director of compliance. So a little bit of a bridge from security over into the business side of it. And a friend of mine that I worked with in IT security at A.G. Edwards threw the position across my radar, and I interviewed for it and ultimately got it. So now I'm into the business world and did the compliance thing for about 5 years, met some awesome people, learned a ton about business, and thought, okay, this is where I need to be. And the focus of that position was a lot about compliance of a law that governs use of the data called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So for anybody out there that gets a copy of their credit report from Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, the law that governs use of all that data applies to our business unit as well. So I was responsible for that. So still kind of security-ish.
Right.
And then over time, the sales guys that would sell to the large employers to get them to contribute their payroll data into this service, they would bring me in. Again, going back to what you mentioned earlier, how do you get these people, as a salesperson, how do you get these people to trust you to have the conversation that this service is the best for you? Well, in this case, we're talking to the nation's largest employers, and the thing that we're trying to get them to buy is contributing the payroll records for all of their employees' data into our database. So a huge ask for somebody to make the decision, yes, here's the social security number for 10,000 employees.
Wow.
Go ahead and put that in your database and make sure you're doing everything right. So the service automates income and employment verifications. If you apply for a mortgage or a loan, they need to verify, does Kevin work at Equifax? Yes. What's his title? How much does he make? How long has he been there? All the things that you think about if you apply for a loan, we automate that transaction.
I see.
So over time, the sales team that's talking to these large employers, they would bring me in to make them feel good about how we're using the data, how we're protecting it, what FCRA means, how do we know who's using the data and when they're using it, how is it tracked, all that stuff to get them comfortable with it. And then over time, I developed a great relationship with them. And the guy who was leading that team, who's still a good friend of mine at this time, we would always debrief after the calls. You know, what did we do right? What could we improve upon? And he said, have you ever thought about a career in sales? And I said, are you in your office? And I literally walked down the hall, and probably 2 or 3 months later, I was working on his team for him in the sales capacity now, which is what I've been doing the last 7 or so years.
So I find this fascinating, you know, your career arc, where, you know, I've always, well, when I was younger, I always thought that, you know, we set a goal for ourselves and, you know, then we try and follow that, and we either reach the goal or we, you know, fail honorably or miserably, as the case might be. And yet, you know, I speak with people, and that's why I love listening to people's stories, because, you know, a lot of the time it comes through that, hey, I started going this way, and I ended up in a completely different position. And yet, you know, they think that, you know, it just happened. But at the same time, when I'm listening to the story, I can detect a certain, you know, vague goal setting and then achieving, and then also a little bit of, you know, happenstance in there. And one of the things, you know, that I'm struck by when you're telling your story is, okay, I started out doing this, which seemed to be a fairly simple job. And then all of a sudden there was this opportunity, which seemed to be a slightly more complicated job, but I thought I could learn how to do this. And then, you know, and, you know, every step takes you out of your area of comfort into an area, what could be an area of discomfort, but it's not, because you keep yourself open to learning, acquiring new skills, and, you know, saying, okay, you know, perhaps it's time for a change, and be willing and open to that change.
Sure.
So at some point in time, there must have been some, and, you know, this is, I know, personal question, but, you know, you and I are talking. So, did you ever get the imposter syndrome where you were like, I'm really not qualified to do this job? And how did you deal with that?
100%.
Really?
I did. Yeah, when I started with Equifax in the compliance role, my hiring manager, my boss, was in Atlanta, which is where Equifax corporate is based. And that's where I was part of the Equifax information security team. And that was all based in Atlanta. So I did not have a team of people that were in my department that did the same thing I did or something close, that were there on site with me to help kind of guide me. So yes, I felt like I was a complete imposter and came to the conclusion that I'm going to fake it till I make it, and I'm going to listen. I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to make mistakes, and I am going to use the ability that I have at that moment to make decisions when it comes time for me to do so, and use a solid foundation. There's a lot of times I'm like, man, I hope this is the right decision because I have no idea. But yeah, I really did. It took a long time for me to get comfortable with that role, to not feel like I didn't know what the hell I was doing on a daily basis when I went in there.
And yet you kept going there.
And I kept going. And a lot of that I attribute to the environment within this company was a lot like what it was at A.G. Edwards. You heard me speak very highly of A.G. Edwards. The camaraderie and just the culture there was great. Same thing here. And it turns out, I learned later, the CEO of this company and the CEO of A.G. Edwards, Ben Edwards, were close friends and interacted a lot and had the same old school kind of just be respectful. You know, we're not a money grubbing corporation. Just be nice to people. And you could really feel that in this company. And the people that I was aligned with by the nature of the job were good people with good moral compasses. And they helped me learn what I needed to do. But my job when I got in there to figure it out was I need to do this as quickly as possible. And I just set meetings with everybody that I could. And over again, it took a lot of notes and was very repetitive until I knew and felt comfortable with whatever the topic was that I was trying to learn about.
So would it be safe to say that you and I both ride motorcycles, and, you know, we ride motorcycles at a reasonably competent level, but we are not world-beating racers. And one of the skills that, you know, whenever we take a school or, you know, talk to other people about motorcycling, one of the things that is always said to us is you have to remain teachable, right? You have to remain open to the fact that how you've been doing things are probably not the best way to do it, or there's another better way of doing and accomplishing the same goal that you're trying to achieve. You know, be smoother, be faster, be better on the brakes, whatever it is. And I think that it is easy, especially with formal training in something. Like, for example, I'm an anesthesiologist, so, you know, that is what I've done most of my life in my professional career. Sometimes when your training is so focused, it is easy to fool oneself into thinking that I know all there is to know. And then it starts becoming part of your ego. And I think that in order for us to develop in life and remain open to opportunity and progress further, one, we have to learn to let go of our ego, which I heard repeatedly when you were describing your progress. You know, what you're saying, I was willing to listen, I was willing to ask questions, and I was willing to, you know, admit that I could be wrong or that I don't know what the best way to do this is. That is completely letting go of your ego and saying, all right, teach me. And the second thing is to just show up and say, okay, you know, I'm willing to learn, teach me how to do this, and I will keep on showing up until I know how to do this. So remaining teachable and letting go of one's ego, I think is the message I'm getting.
Yeah.
And to ignore the imposter syndrome when it rears its ugly head up. Yeah.
Gosh, I think about how uncomfortable I was during those moments.
Yeah.
And happy that I got through it and am where I am today. But yeah, I agree with you 100% that in life, there is at no point in time where we ever stop learning. And there's different levels of that. I mean, you can get as many advanced degrees as you want to, which is the accelerated version of that, or being open to change and listening to other people's ideas on different ways to do things is the lesser level of that. This becomes kind of a teachable moment with my daughter today because she's 7.5. She's in first grade, about to finish up, and loves school sometimes and other times doesn't love school and doesn't like that. And I have done everything I can to explain to her, you have a lot of school ahead of you that you are required to have, that you are going to do. You got years of that ahead of you. But here's what's really cool is the world changes so much every single day, depending on what you're into and what you change from. And as you grow up, that you're never going to stop learning. I want her to develop a thirst for learning where she wants to always continue to be better and put in the work and read books. And if you decide that you want to go, take up a new hobby, go read books on it, listen to other people that can help you become the best at whatever it is that you want to do. And then that may go away and you get to go learn and do something else. So yeah, we never stop learning ever. And I also like what you said about putting down the ego and being willing to just listen to other people and learn from their mistakes. That helps minimize ones that I do, because as you develop relationships and trust, they're going to say, hey, when I had to do this, I really screwed up this way. Don't do that. That wasn't fun. Try it a different way.
Yeah.
And you get to learn from their mistakes and hopefully not make them.
Yes. So one would think that, having tracked your progress all the way from your childhood to what you're doing today, we would have touched upon the essentials of your story. But there's more to it, isn't there? You are also a co-owner of a small business along with your wife.
Correct.
Okay. Tell me a little bit
It's technically
about
her business.
Yeah,
I kind of support it, but
Right,
it was a
right.
grassroots effort to begin with.
But you're involved in it, and you have come to learn about it as well, right?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots to learn there.
So how was that experience?
We can really go back to the fake it till you make it
Okay.
as entrepreneurs here. Because we were not
I
entrepreneurs.
again, salespeople, respect. Entrepreneurs, huge respect, because
Sure.
that is such, for me, that's truly walking out into the void, for those of us who are, okay, I'm going to work and I'm going to get a salary. And then, you say, okay, I'm going to start a project and I don't really know what's going to happen with it, but I'm going to do it. And so, give us a little background into what happened and how you guys.
Sure. So my wife, Robin, we've been married, I guess, 11 years-ish now. And she was in sales, outside sales, in the aesthetics industry. So kind of medical sales, but on the aesthetic side of it. And had worked for Allergan for quite some time and was quite successful in doing that. And she sold a line of skincare to dermatologists, plastic surgeons, medical spas that helped reverse the signs of aging, help people look their best. And was very good at it. And she ultimately had a family tragedy where her sister died by suicide.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
And
that.
thank you. And that was deeply impactful because she was in our lives. She was an awesome person. She was a recovering addict, doing great, was many years clean, had a ton of people that she was sponsoring. She was heavily involved in the program. So this took us and just totally rocked our world. And it took her a little bit of time away from work, obviously, to get through this and process it. And so Allergan was cool with that at first. And you're in a business world here. Her job is to sell, and there are goals that have to be met. And over time, we just decided that maybe that wasn't the right fit for her. She needed more time to process this. And so she ended up leaving Allergan and took another job, another sales role after that. And it didn't end up working out. And then during that time, we're like, okay, she has a ton of knowledge of working with various companies in our industry that are in the aesthetic side of things. So she knows what makes an office great, what makes an office terrible, who's doing something cool, who's not. And we thought, you know what, we live in South County, and there was not another medical spa within like a 12-mile radius of our house. And we're in suburbia. I mean, there's money out there. There's people that are getting these services that are driving somewhere else. So she thought, why don't we do this ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of us are entrepreneurial-minded people. We never had the idea of doing this. We're happy with our corporate jobs. They paid us well. We live very comfortably. And so we did some research, and she came up with a business plan. And the numbers, you don't really know if they make sense or not. We didn't have one patient that we knew would come to us. So, it was a huge risk. So we started doing some research about corporate real estate and renting and square footage. We're learning as we go. And over time and a lot of work, things just fell into place. And
did you talk to a lot of people who had already gone down that road, at least in terms of starting businesses, or was this purely a venture that you and Robin
we didn't do a ton
undertook?
of research up front on that in terms of interviewing many different business owners. We know some that are business owners. Our neighbor and very good friend is a business owner, owns a lot of different businesses, and is a very well-minded entrepreneur and helped us with a lot of the deep questions that we have. And over time, the business plan covered as many topics and potential hurdles and roadblocks that we could come up with and how to financially overcome them to see if this is, we're putting a house on the line here. So to see if this is.
So you were risking your, personal assets in order to start this.
We went down the road with a bank that we've been banking with forever on a personal level, who we think very highly of and love them. And they are bigger than they could help us with. So they pointed us to the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and we didn't have what they wanted to connect the dots to offer up a loan in what we needed.
Okay.
So we ended up going a different direction, found somebody else. So we got a home equity loan and then another signature loan and started what's called All For You Med Spa. And it was we got a little bit of help because the location that we found was very close to our home.
So where was it originally?
It's in Oakville, is the part of South County. It was at the intersection of Telegraph and Christopher. There's a complex there they designed it for office spaces, but a lot of it has been completely empty since they built it in 2006 or so, to the point, I say completely empty, like gravel floors. They've never had a tenant in there, not a plumbing, no nothing, no anything. Our particular spot that we took is about 3,000 square feet. It was formerly a laser eye place where people would get laser surgery on their eyes.
Oh, okay.
So it was set up like a medical office environment. So it had all the rooms set up. They all had water in them. But the owners, I believe, passed away and ultimately went out of business. It was empty for a couple of years. So we came in with structurally what we needed. We gave it a cosmetic facelift and started All For You Med Spa. That was about five or so.
All puns intended. With the cosmetic facelift. So how did it go?
Overall, I think I would say that it has gone very well.
Okay.
Very well meaning, and I define very well as there was not ever a huge risk of us losing our house. We've never been behind on payments. There were times where our accounts were way lower than what we needed to be. Ton of frustration, ton of times that I want to walk away from this. Like, this is silly. My wife gave up a very healthy income. And now we added all the stress, all the problems that come with being a business owner. And not that we're all focused on money, but like, that's kind of a nice part of it. You want to make money and buy nice things that you want. Yeah. Motorcycles aren't cheap, as you know.
Yeah, I do know.
So overall, I think it's been fantastic. And I've never been heavily involved in, like, it's her, they're her businesses.
Her baby. Right.
I helped out where I could. And sometimes that meant answering phones and taking appointments, and so we're in aesthetics, so Botox and lip fillers, all sorts of different things like that. Again, all designed to make people look younger and be the best version of themselves that they can be. And I was doing consultations on the phone with people, and I knew enough about it that I could answer all of their questions. And if there was ever anything that I couldn't answer, I would say, great question. I don't know how to answer that. Let me get the nurse, or let me have somebody call you back.
Yeah.
And I think what we get that has helped us out is we're likable. We're easygoing. We're not stuffy. We're not pretentious. You're coming to us because you look in the mirror and see something that you wish you looked 10 years younger, something that just you focus on. Come talk to us. If we can help you out, we'll let you know. And if not, we'll let you know. And we became very easygoing, and I think people hooked on to that.
That's great.
We're, over 5 years, I think, or so down the road now. We recently just changed locations.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. So when did you start the project? When did you actually have your first opening?
So our grand opening was January 4th of this year.
No, the one before.
Before that was December 1st of 2017. I think it was 2017. So we're 5 years in. So
2017, and then a couple of years in, we get hit by COVID. Did that affect, everything that you folks were doing? Did it affect your business?
Yeah, it definitely did. So it started with the mask mandates and everything. Then ultimately, all businesses got shut down if they were non-essential. And although some of our patients might disagree with you, Botox is not necessarily essential.
Right, but yes.
But no, yeah, we did shut down for 2 months, and some of our vendors were okay with payments and stopping those, because if there's no revenue coming in, it's hard to make those payments. We had some revenue coming in still because we have a monthly membership program where it auto debits people's accounts, and it's like a VIP program kind of situation. So there was still some revenue coming in. Some people stopped those, which we happily did, because if they're out of work too, no problem. We're doing the right thing for our people. We ended up getting some money from the SBA later down the road for some of the COVID relief stuff, which definitely helped us out. But yeah, we stood the test of time there and still kept plugging through.
All right. So tell me about this new location now that you guys just started this year, right?
Yeah, started. So our last location.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So one other part of the story that becomes related here is, along the way after opening up the med spa, my wife decided she wanted to open up a women's clothing boutique as well, because we had an extra room that was in our medical spa that was not being utilized to provide services. And so we thought, pretty low risk here. I mean, all the main costs are absorbed by the med spa, so let's start this up. So there was one room within our med spa that was dedicated for a women's clothing boutique. We made it look very nice. We put as many clothes in there in a creative way as we could. And it did okay. It was not profitable, but it wasn't losing tons of money, because there's just not that much of an exchange of product to worry about. It's not going to be terrible if it didn't sustain. And one of the problems there was you could only have so much inventory in a room, and some people want to go shopping for clothes in a clothing boutique, and they don't want to walk through a medical spa to get there. For whatever preconceived notions they may have about med spas, they just didn't want to do it. Totally respect that. So, and one other thing about that location is it was set back a little bit from the road, and in the plaza where we were, it's anchored by 2 great restaurants that don't get busy until the evening time or on weekends when we're closed. So drive-through traffic did not exist. We're far enough back from the road that people didn't necessarily see us right away when they were driving by. And as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, how do you find new patients? How do you find new patients? Location, location, location. So an opportunity came to move about 1.5 miles down the road inside a plaza where there's a Deerberg's Plaza, where there's a grocery store, and it's just a large L-shaped plaza with a ton of different successful businesses that have a lot of traffic going through there. So we ended up leasing 2 spots right next to each other, one to make primarily for the med spa, which obviously is our core business, and the other one now gives the boutique a fair shot. It has its own door, its own space. Part of it is med spa related on the backside of it for extra rooms for growth, and a lot more space for the clothes, probably 3 times the square footage for the clothes. So fast forward. So we decided this we probably started the conversation in July or August of last year, looking at, because this is more costly now. You're in a different plaza, so our per square foot price went up quite a bit. And okay, let's dust off our business plan again and see how things look today and make sure we can sustain this. And so far it's worked out great. We decided to do it. We had just paid off the business from our last location. Everything was completely paid off within less than 4 years, and we kind of reset that clock. But we're not relying on that for our day-to-day expenses. My position applies for that, so we're fortunate in that respect.
Right.
But we're trying to think 5 years down the road, which is what ideally you should do when you start a new business, is don't think about making money year 1, year 2. You're trying to just get by, pay off loan, and then ultimately become profitable, like where you can start recoup some of that money in 5 years. So we kind of reset that clock again. I don't think it's a 5-year clock anymore, because we're established now. But we moved in this plaza, and it's been great, both from the med spa side, but especially the boutique side, because the boutique having its own entrance now, a lot of foot traffic going by for people that don't care about the med spa services. They come in, just want to shop for clothes, come on in. But then they ask questions about the med spa side and learn about what services are, and they can tie it together that you can come in and look better and wear different clothes on the way out, all in the same visit. And ironically enough, going back to what you talked about earlier, very early in the podcast, was the daddy-daughter date, or daddy-daughter weekend, is my wife is in Nashville as we speak with our team, because there's an event there at the convention center they call Market, which is where the people that are vendors that we buy clothes from in the boutique, they are all on display there. So instead of buying them from a website or a catalog or whatever, you get to see them and touch them and try them on and whatever else. And there's, I'm sure, promotions, whatever. So it's a convention center full of different clothing wholesalers, I guess. So that's where they're at now, is going to come back with a truckload of clothes that are going to be shipped to us for the boutique.
So I have a cousin who is in the whole cosmetics business and the spa business and stuff. And I see very few personal Facebook posts from him, but most of the time when he's posting, he's at some convention center or another, or doing, one of those the trials where people come in and they get injected, and just to see,
like a live demonstration.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And so, I mean, that's what his life is. And I was just thinking, this must be super busy for both of you to, it's a lot of juggling, right?
Yes. And especially for my wife, she handles everything day in and day out. So it's working with the staff, it's working with training, it's coming up with policies and procedures to make things consistent with how whatever rules according to our business are applied to everybody. It's hiring, it's trying to grow the business, it's dealing with the vendors. My portion of it is very far removed now from the day-to-day stuff, but I'm everything from the handyman to the CFO, where I do all the QuickBooks stuff, so I handle all the financial side of it. So at night, when Remy goes to bed, I'll go down a couple nights a week and open up QuickBooks and import all our transactions, and I deal with our accountant and pay all that stuff.
Even with the initial resistance to accountancy, it seems like you were destined to do this one way or another.
Man, this conversation just keeps coming back full circle.
Yeah.
This is way less on the accounting. The accounting side, I am not good at. QuickBooks does all that for me. I'm what I would maybe call a data entry at that point. I think.
Fair enough.
But figuring all that out it's tough and interesting, and this is just a true grassroots effort that we are learning as we go. Never stop learning.
So perhaps, I would make mention of the fact that, small businesses exist because they're somebody's passion. And they exist a lot of the times because people think that there is a need for a particular service in their community, and they take it upon themselves to say, perhaps I am the one who should be fulfilling this need. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the times, people look upon businesses, it's a money-making venture. That is part of what it is. But there is so much more to it, if you look at it in a holistic fashion. Now, I know that you employ several staff members and have continued to do so, even though times have been tough.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about that. How many people do you employ currently in your business?
Gosh, we just hired one, started last week, who is going to kind of be our office manager, sort of. I don't know what the specific title is.
Right.
Let me back up a little bit. Part of what Robin's goal is to find somebody who can replace her in doing a lot of the administration of business things that somebody else could do. Performance reviews, working with the vendors, all sorts of that, to allow her to focus on strategy and growth. Mm-hmm. So she hired somebody that we think is very ideal for that. We also recently hired 2 new front desk ladies that they're the face of All Free Med Spa. They're, when the patients come in and the patients leave, that's who they see, that's who they interact with to transact the paying for those services. So very, very important. And then we go to the providers, where currently we have a nurse injector, one, and we're looking to hire another one, who goes under the skin. So they administer the Botox, they administer the different dermal fillers that will reduce the signs of aging. And then we currently have 2 estheticians, which stay on top of the skin essentially, and don't do on the injectable side, but do different services again to make your skin look better. So that's a gamut of what we have. And then on the boutique side, we have one young lady who is primarily responsible for our social media and a lot of the day-to-day stuff for the boutique in terms of how it looks. A little bit now in purchasing. She's in Nashville with Robin. It's going to have some input on what we purchase and is really Robin's right-hand person for the growth of the boutique. And then we have a few part-timers that are just working the cash register, again, helping out with social media. Social media is a huge thing today. We need models for the different clothes that come in. And they're all great with social media, with Instagram and new ways to put up reels that capture people's attention. I mean, it's really a neat learning opportunity to watch the next generation who's into that more and is trained that way, figure out how to grow business.
Before we bring this to an end, would you like to mention the name of your spa and the name of the boutique and where people can find you online and what have you? And we'll put links to this in the YouTube video as well.
Thank you for the opportunity to do so.
Of course.
As growing businesses, we'll take any opportunity to get our name out there that we can. The medical spa is called All For You Med Spa, FOR, so ALLFORYOU Med Spa. We're in South St. Louis County. Our website is allforyoumedSpa.com. You can find our social media on Instagram and Facebook. We have some really neat content. The lady that's doing the young girl that's doing our social media, it's fun, it's quirky, it's informational, it's really, really cool. And the boutique is Remy and Rose Boutique. So Remy plus Rose. Remy obviously is my daughter's name. Rose is the name of a young lady that used to work for us that moved to Springfield because she got married, and her daughter was Primrose. So we connected those two together to get Remy and Rose Boutique. And again, you can find us. We have a website that connects to a Shopify where you can purchase online and another cool social media there.
Excellent. We'll put links to it, once I send you the
Thank you very much.
YouTube. Of course, my pleasure. And, I am even more convinced now that as a segue to this, I should have a podcast with Robin and ask her about the challenges because, she's, really the spirit of the entrepreneurial endeavor that you guys have undertaken. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I have been meaning to talk to you for a long time, and I think you and I will be riding together to celebrate Grant's something or the other, right? I don't know if it's his birthday.
A belated birthday. A belated milestone birthday.
Yeah, there you go.
And I really, really appreciate the opportunity. This has been meaningful for me. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come speak with you.
It is my honor. Thank you.
Sure.